Okay, we are starting our Public Budget Committee meeting here at 3 o'clock. I'm going to pull up the agenda for today and share it with the committee. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jim, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to go down through the agenda here with the first item being the discussion of the preliminary budget presentation. With Nancy Bickus and Linda, I didn't know if you had a chance to watch the board meeting, if you had any follow-up questions regarding the presentation itself. I'll just say this. With the presentation itself, I did some focusing on the mandated costs that are handed to all 500 school districts across Pennsylvania, that being the pension, the charter school, and the special education. And I do that just to let both the board members and the public know that these are items that are mandated by state legislators. They dictate the cost or the percentages sent to us, and they dictate the tuition rates for charter schools and the services that we are required to service, to pass on through students with special needs. Sorry about that. And I bring that up because I'm not so sure a lot of people understand, let's say charter school, for example. When a child does leave our district, we lose that money. The cost for that classroom or the cost for that building does not change. It actually changes because we lose a student. And like I said, Tuesday night, regular ed tuition for our charter schools is $11,500, and if it's a special needs, it's double that. It's $22,900. So I'm not going to go into it again unless somebody has any follow-up questions regarding the pension, the special education, and the charter schools. Only my final note, it is very important for us as a district to make sure we pass on to PDE the most accurate information we have or data that we have as far as the day the child left, the types of services, and report that correctly to PDE, because that does affect the rates that they pass on to us, either in the form of subsidy or in the form of some type of a tuition charge against us. So with that being said, I'll move on to the next item on there. At the end of my presentation, I did go through the fact that our total expenditures were $33,829,000, and then revenue of $33,212 with the use of a fund balance of $616,000. Right there, that's good, Janet. Thank you. The board did pass the proposed budget, but also indicated that the bottom line of $616,000 or the use of the fund balance to pare that down to zero before the next board meeting. I will say this, that we will do everything in our effort to get it to zero. We have a lot of ideas in place, and I'm going to go through a couple of those right now with the budget committee. And again, I open the floor if you have any additional questions or any other maybe sections of the budget that you would like us to look at. Some of the items that we're looking at, and again, please, these are up for committee discussion. At the meeting, we discussed or talked about the CARES Act, which are federal stimulus money of $314,000 that will be shown on the revenue side of this budget to bring that number down. We talked about elimination of another instructional teacher, which is about $87,000. We talked about reviewing the transportation budget and see if there's some savings there, and that is ongoing right now. We do have another position that we may possibly be looking at eliminating, and I won't go into the details of that right now, but that could save us somewhere about $55,000, $60,000. And then, and this is totally a board discussion item. We are going to be looking for an athletic director. This budget also includes the supplemental for the assistant athletic director, and it's a question whether you want to leave that in the budget or not. So with that being said, with what I just discussed with the CARES money and eliminating some of the positions, we're probably down under 150,000 already. I can tell you since Tuesday, Dr. Sargent and I and Mr. Sanders, the tech coordinator here, we've already cut $45,000 out of the technology budget since Tuesday. So the technology budget that you see tonight, which is the next section here, is actually different than the numbers in Tuesday's presentation because we've already made cuts to the technology end. And we will be meeting with the athletic director, Mr. Evans, next week, and we'll go through some of his stuff, and I firmly believe there'll be cuts there. So, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. So does anybody have any comments on the, again, I'm going down the agenda, the bottom line of the agenda, the 616. We as an administration will make every effort to get it down to zero, so there's no use of the fund balance that was indicated to us Tuesday night.
Okay, I have 3 questions.
Yes.
The first question, is the CARES Act definitely guaranteed? My understanding that's coming from the federal government and they have not passed that yet. Is that correct?
That is money we are slated to get. That is money that has been approved. It's whether or not and how the state determines how that's being dispersed is the issue. They have posted on the state website that we are to get $314,000, which was slightly lower than what was originally proposed. But there's a possibility that some of that money may have to go to our non-public schools just because that's how sometimes that money is distributed. And they may take some off the top to balance out their general and special ed fund monies. So obviously, whatever monies we get, we would use as a revenue source to offset the 2021 budget. And then whatever that difference in cost was, we will have to cut elsewhere.
Okay, but that CARES Act is only good for 1 year, correct?
Correct. It will only be used for specific expenses, nothing that would carry over into future years.
We will not spend any of that money on reoccurring expenses. It'll
Nope.
be one-time item purchases only.
Okay, now my second question is, have you taken into consideration any type of delinquency rates? I did some calculations, and if you even have a 10% delinquency rate in property taxes, that could be equivalent to over $1 million.
Okay. Linda, let me, and that's actually the next item on the agenda, revenue adjustments. Let me just explain to you what I did for this first proposal. We as a district are a member of the PASBO, which is a statewide business managers organization. And they did a statewide study of tax collections specific to school districts. And when I did the budget for the presentation Tuesday night, I based my numbers a lot on their study. And with that being said, for example,
And I have it pulled up, Jim, on the screen.
okay. Yeah, they for example, for real estate, local real estate tax collections, they were estimating a decrease of about 2.25%. In the budget I presented, it's about 2.1. And it's a little bit different because our actual assessed values went up. And the assessed values that went up was the commercial property, quite frankly, Tenesca. And, you know, we firmly believe they're going to be paying their taxes on time in the full amount. So I adjusted that slightly. But so for real estate taxes, I adjusted our collections by about 2.1%. Our earned income collections, again, I went off of their recommendation. And I also worked with our tax collector, Berkheimer. And I'm actually waiting for a final report from them. They're going to do a study for March and April collections and see what the decrease has been. But I adjusted our earned income tax collections by about 10%. It's a little bit lower than what they were projecting. They were projecting somewhere about 14 to 16%. But I'm also working with our tax collector, Berkheimer, and I'm working with their numbers also. As far as the real estate transfer tax, we get a 0.5%. In our budget, it's about $135,000. I actually cut that down by about 28%. And again, I'm using PASBO's numbers with real estate property transfers. Their projection was a 28% decrease in that collection. And then the final adjustment I made was our investment earnings. I'm a little concerned when we get to September about cash flow, particularly with our bond payments, about $2 million due on October 1st. But long story short, we're not going to have the money to invest. So I decreased our investment income by about $51,000. So I don't know if that answered your questions, but the budget I presented Tuesday did make some adjustment for collections. I know your question was specific to delinquent collections, and I have a delinquent collection payment due from Westmoreland County in June. I wanted to see what the impact of that payment was before I made any final adjustment to this budget.
Well, my comment is in that the unemployment numbers came out, and they were probably, since the numbers were high as the Great Depression, that I really think that these real estate and local wage taxes are probably really underestimated. I really think they're going to be a lot higher with people not working, 1 in 5 people not having a job, and they don't expect this recovery probably for another 30 months. So
Yeah.
that's my only comment on that.
Well, and I'll just follow up with 2 comments. I don't disagree with you, but I'm also hopeful that as restrictions get lifted from counties, more people will be able to go back to work, and that will impact it. And then again, I will revisit all these numbers before our June board meeting in our final budget and make the adjustments accordingly. And again, based on the most current information I have. And like I said, our local tax collector is Berkheimer, and they're going to be putting out a report specific to school districts on the impact of this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions with that? Okay, so I did go through the revenue adjustments that were made, and I just want to comment. I did mention Tuesday nights that the administration did make a number of solid cuts, and Dr. Sardin, you can add to this list if you see fit. But the elementaries did look at the after-school programs, and they did reduce and cut the after-school programs. The guidance department used a program called the ROCKS program that I think was between $3,000 and $5,000. They're going to redo how they test students, so we cut that program. Classroom supplies were cut. Library supplies were cut. All total within the buildings, they cut, between the 5 buildings, they cut about $94,000 out of the budget. And then on top of that, again, we worked with special ed department and the technology department, and we cut probably $35,000 of professional services out of the budget that was presented Tuesday night. One of the items that I didn't touch on, and I actually didn't have it on any of our screens, that Dr. Sardin and I are working, and quite frankly, pushing back a little bit, is the projected budget for the CTC in our budget is to go up by $95,000 next year. And it was a kind of a sticker shock for us because we budget to send approximately 140 students to the CTC, and they had a 10% increase in their tuition for next year. And I myself sat through a meeting last week with the CTC and some other business managers, and we pretty much voiced our concern that with everything going on in COVID and the loss of income that school districts are experiencing, that now is not the time to propose a 10% increase on per child per day down there. So we've asked them to go back and revise their budget. But I think it's important to know a little bit of a driving force, a little bit of a driver of increased cost for this budget is our students that go to the CTC. I should say this, the tuition rate going to be charged by the CTC is up 10% for next year. And our cost would increase by about $95,000.
And that budget, and that budget will come in front of the board for approval. I'm assuming here in June. I got to tell you, the CTC has met with the business managers, has not yet met with the superintendents, but that kind of increase when they're not facing the COVID crisis like we are is totally unacceptable. So that will be said. I mean, I just don't, you know, it's just not the time for that. And, you know, some of the things that they've added are stuff that if we all have to tighten up, so should they.
What kind of things are they adding that there's such an increase in their?
I know they just hired, I do believe they just hired a new executive director. That salary went up some, I think Jim had said to me.
About 16,000.
Right, for the
For the
new
salary.
executive director. They added $200,000 some dollars in technology services of some sort into their budget. And the other thing was, I forget what the third thing was, Jim, that made that. Oh, the nurse.
That they were going to add a new nurse position down there, and then they were going to do a capital budget transfer of $60,000 just into a capital fund down there,
Just to have.
As a reserve. And again, I just don't think it's this time of the year is the time to be making those type of transfers into a savings account. So, and we eat the cost of that transfer. We as school districts eat that cost.
So that'll all be voiced if and when they have a meeting with the superintendents. And then obviously when that budget is brought to our board for approval, because I do believe, if that right, Jim, that they approve it in June.
Yeah, it has to be approved in June. CTC has to meet the June
Which is a little
30th
later
deadline.
this year than normal, because I think we normally approve the CTC in May, but they did get a new business manager over there. So I'm assuming that's why we're a little bit later than normal.
Yeah, they have a new business manager and a new director.
So will that be passed for us to review before our next board meeting?
Well, does it come to us first, Jim, or does it go to them?
It has to be approved by the local school districts first, I believe. Yeah. Before their board. Their board meeting is, I believe, June 24th, I think is what the date that they threw. So ours is before that, so.
Well, like you said, if we're cutting, they're going to have to tighten up their budget as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah,
That's
and we did
ridiculous.
voice that concern. Yeah.
Okay.
So with that being said, the next item on the agenda is discussion of final budget presentation. And again, I kind of do it like I did Tuesday night. I'll say, here's where we were on our preliminary budget that's posted on our website with a $616,000 use of a fund balance. And now I'll go through the necessary, the cuts that we've made. I'll take any suggestions from this committee, board members on other places in the budget we should be looking at. And I'll propose a final budget. And I say that because if there's some thoughts out there about maybe different programs to look at or different positions to look at, different line items in a technology or an athletic budget, for example, that we're going to look at, we need to know that so we can make the final adjustments before it's presented at the June. I shouldn't say the final adjustments, but the final analysis of the requested cuts before the June 9th meeting. So.
I have a question. I had
Sure.
heard that they were going to allow maybe school districts and townships to allow taxpayers who could not pay for their property taxes to defer the payments until December 31st and not be excess penalties and interest. Is that true?
Yeah, if you look at the screen now, Nancy, you'll see the last thing, taxpayer flexibility. And that's probably something that we as a school district and a school board are going to have to talk about at our June meeting. There is a bill out there in the House right now that would eliminate the so-called face and penalty period, discount face and penalty period. The discount period would still stay, but the face period would overlap and take the place of the penalty period up until December 31st. If that bill's passes, we as a school board, a school district would have to make a motion to accept, to change our tax bills, so to speak, our tax collection process.
So the board would vote on this in June, possibly.
Yeah, but I would say June possibly, but I think we have to wait and see what legislators do with this. But with that being said, the board has this option to make this regardless.
Okay, now how would that figure into your calculations as far as your revenue? If, for example, a lot of people decided that they weren't going to pay their property taxes until the very end of the year.
When I budget the net amount, which means I factor in the discount, I factor in the penalty collections, and I budget the net amount. It's not going to change the budget number. What you're talking about, I think, is more of a cash flow issue. When cash is actually received and to be able to be used and spent versus what the numbers. Because at the end of the day, again, whether they pay their bill in September, they pay it in November, they pay it in January, the total amount due from that particular property owner is not going to change. It's just when we're going to collect it that becomes the impact on it. Is that okay with you? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I just would think you would lose some revenue if there was interest charged for the payment being late. That money could either have been invested, or you don't get the revenue in as early as you anticipate.
Right.
Whether or not you might, I don't know. Do you
Yeah,
borrow?
and that's-
Do you do short-term borrowing?
And that's the reason, number one, I earlier in the discussion here, I adjusted my investment earnings down to, I cut that number by, I think, $51,000, because I don't believe we're going to have the money to invest. So that's been adjusted to account for that.
Okay.
I've already made the adjustment to account for that. Regarding your second point, there has been discussions about other school districts with cash flow, and are they going to, is it going to be necessary to take out a TAN, which is a tax anticipation note? Basically, you take out a loan to fill the gap between the time of your cash flow shortfall versus when you collected the taxes. I'm not getting any indication that we need that right now, but that is something I am thinking about. So.
And what would you think the interest rate would be on that?
I wouldn't even know where to guess. It would be very low right now. I would first I have two sources to go to get the best interest rate right now that we have an accounts with. One being First National Bank, and one being what's called PSLOF, which is a statewide investment company for school districts and municipalities, for that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that being said, the next item on the agenda is the technology budget. And again, these are numbers that are different than what was presented on Tuesday. We got together, we went through the different types of licensing fees and services, new equipment, classroom instructional software, and we are able to pare this budget down by just over $45,000. We keep in mind that with technology, we do try to keep technology the most up to date around here. Mr. Sanders has it on a cycle on when computers and different softwares and different servers get replaced around here. We have a cycle that we keep things on so they're constantly updated, and they aren't going to fail. And we've modified that a little bit, and we're able to pull out about $45,000 of this budget.
So in the budget itself, the building software, as we kind of go through this, I can kind of give you a feel for what each of those softwares are used for. The audio visual repairs and supplies and equipment, those are all things used within the classroom technology-wise, such as projectors, document cameras, those types of things that are used to present within the classrooms, as well as repair parts with those types of machines. There is repairs on bulbs and that kind of, those kind of items. So The majority of our classrooms in the district do have those type of projectors in them. So a lot of this stuff is replacement or equipment as far as repairs for those. The district technology department, if you look through this section of the budget, professional development, training, outside services. So outside services are if we would need to have somebody come in and do wiring of the building that we're not able to handle ourselves. Sometimes you have to have people come in and do configurations of certain setups of servers that isn't done in-house. So we always budget for that. Then there's obviously your regular repairs and maintenance of equipment. That could be computer labs, that could be teacher laptops, could be, you know, Chromebooks, Chromebook carts, Mac carts, iPads, whatever equipment in the district, we set aside money for repair and maintenance of that. The copier leases within this, as well as if you look on that one budget item here on the screen, this was a lease that we had in the district that ran out this year. So that is no longer on the books for the 2021 school year.
A lease of what?
Computer equipment.
It was her Apple computer.
And where are all the Chromebooks that they were using on the school buses after school for homework?
We're using them in carts after school, as well as they were part of our distribution for this online learning.
Now, part of that, the Google Chrome package on the bus,
Those were all grants. That was all grant
okay.
money.
Now, are we going to be continuing that on the buses next year with the teachers?
We are not.
Okay.
And where would I see that savings from? I'm assuming you were paying the teachers to be on the bus.
Correct.
And what was that line item?
You won't see it on this budget. This budget,
We deleted it.
you know, well, it's not deleted, but it's the budgets that I show you here do not include what in my world, the 100 and 200, 100 salaries and 200 benefits.
That would be under tutoring, like after school tutoring is where that would fall.
If we do have a personnel meeting, you will see that.
Yeah, I want to be able to see some of those numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll be able to see that.
Okay.
Okay, so Janet, if you go down a little bit further, or if you want to continue with this.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of the stuff out here, obviously network communications, travel, conferences, technology conferences. This would be for the P&C conference, which is the biggest technology conference in the state. We normally send 2 or 3 administrators and 2 teachers.
Okay, well, we're going to be talking about conferences because with this kind of money that we're not going to have, I'd rather.
I can tell you that right now in the entire budget, other than P&C, the only other conferences that are scheduled in any part of the budget are federal programs, because we have to do those because those are part of getting our Title I funding. The Data Summit PIMS conference, which is part of child accounting, which we have to go to. And the only other than this P&C we're talking about is the Superintendent's Forum.
Okay, again, what we'll be looking at that is something that can possibly not have to happen for a year.
Well, some of those you have to understand have to happen by state law to get the monies.
The technology one?
No, not the technology one, but 2 of the other 4 have to happen.
That's fine.
Yeah. Now, remember too, I mean, obviously it's up to the board, but in the time frame we're in right now with technology training and where we're at with online education, those types of training are very critical to our functioning. But if they're deleted, we'll figure it out. Other than that, we have replacement equipment, new equipment, budget, and then dues and fees.
Dr.
So-
Sarden,
Yes,
at the last budget meeting, I had asked you the question if for some reason school does not start in the fall, that all the students in the school district would have their computers. Has that been accomplished as far as either in the budget or being purchased?
I can tell you that the CARES monies, so right now in the district, we've handed out, we've had a request for, I just put those numbers together, like 186 computers for families that have requested it. We've had 171 computers distributed. The CARES monies are monies that we are going to utilize to make sure that we are one-to-one.
Okay, because I've been listening to Secretary Perez, Department of Education in Harrisburg, and he is definitely saying that he is not certain school is going to start in the fall.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're ready for that.
All right.
Now, Jim, one thing, if you go back there, that new equipment, that's counting for the computers then, right? And that spot for
Right.
right there,
Yeah.
that for the new equipment, 133,000, that's more laptops then.
That is correct. That's what that's where CARES money will be spent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So when you go to down to the line item reporting, you're going to see software licensing fees, MCLAP Sybil's renewal. That's how we monitor our reading progress at the elementary level. The online library is our access, and the EBSCO is our access system for online learning. The health program we use is Nursing eTools. That allows us to keep track of the student, not personnel, healthcare files. iTunes apps, we do budget some of that in each building, and that is to be able to push out apps to individual iPads, mostly at the elementary level or special education. So we're able to put apps on different iPads. And then the smart music is a renewal lease that is used by our music department. You'll see pretty similar in all of the building on each of the buildings here, the exception of some of our buildings use Educational Galaxy, and that is a learning software that kids are able to access not only in school, but also from home.
How many are actually using it?
In the buildings, a large portion. I can get you exact numbers, but I can tell you that is one of the programs that kids compete against each other. They use it in school and they use it at home.
And as far as the dibbles, is it absolutely necessary to have that? I mean, as far as I go, I think our kids are tested to death, to be honest with you.
It's progress monitoring to determine small group instruction with regard to our tier program. So it's pretty critical in order to determine those types of placements for kids in a small group tier type setting.
How many years have we had it at York?
Probably as long as I've been here, we've been doing dibbles.
Okay.
Maybe even before that, but
I know I've heard that word for a long time.
Yeah.
I just don't know if how effective it is.
well, I mean, it does allow us to break our kids up. So
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, other than that, pretty much straight down with the exception of, you'll see on here, the Guidance Career Zone. That is the program that we use to house our students' electronic portfolios that is required under the Future Ready Index. So that is as far as software. Talked about this a little bit already. This is our bulbs, our audio visual supplies for each of the buildings. We do have built in here some security cameras. Obviously, if you get, sometimes you have safety and security grants every year. Whether those will come next year, we have no way of knowing that. So we do build in for some replacement cameras because we do have a nice camera system within the district that we've gotten all through grants, but you also need to have some monies if we need to add, or in this case, they have 3 for new equipment adding, but you also need some for replacement just in case.
How often are we needing to get headphones for the computer lab?
We don't buy headphones very often.
And my other question is, what is the balance going to be in our book after, the school's closed, and what we had to spend and what we didn't spend, like from the previous budget?
I think Jim touched on that the other day. It was what, 133 to the good?
100, my projection on Tuesday's presentation was a net increase of 133,000.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, keep in mind that that's adjusted a little bit, obviously, with everything going on. But with 9 retiring teachers to pay out their unused sick day according to the labor agreement.
I just couldn't remember the number. That's fine. Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. Okay, 133,000. And I will update that number for next month.
Now, all these projectors that we were replacing, are they just because they're broken? We're just trying to keep up with renewing them, but $1,200 a clip, how many? And
go the other way, Janet. Go the other way.
I think it's like 3 projectors.
Yeah.
Yeah, the projectors are like around 400 each, give or take.
That's correct.
$1,200 it says. It's $3,600.
Yeah.
There's 4 of them.
Yeah, keep going down. keep going down. Right here.
Right here, yeah.
5 of them.
So that's
Yeah.
3 projectors for $1,200. So 400 each.
No, there, it's listed 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah,
5 times.
Correct.
Nine.
That's per building, correct. So we're projecting that we'll need to replace 3 projectors per building.
So
At the
I
high
guess
school and
what- I
middle
guess-
school.
I
At the high
guess what
school,
Nancy's asking is how many projectors do we have at each building?
each
and can-
teacher has a projector in their classroom virtually. So that means we have approximately 151 projectors in the district.
And
Again,
what-
as I
are you
mentioned,
doing
we,
that often?
yeah, again, as I mentioned,
Good.
I'm sorry. We do have our equipment, the technology equipment on some type of replacement cycle so that they're not failing during the school year. So we try to replace so many a year, the ones that are old or the ones that are no longer working. So we do try to keep
Okay.
up on them, so.
And you'll see more in the 501 and 801. That's the middle school and high school, because that's our bigger staff. So
This,
next,
this,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
this page here is our district-wide software. This is what runs the district right here. Power School runs your grades. There's a lot of internet access service here. School Do, Hall Pass. Those are pretty much required softwares to have to be able to run a school district here. I don't know, Dr. Sargent, if you have anything.
Yeah, a hall pass is what's used to track visitors that come in the building. You scan their license and they tell you whether or not they're on any of the bad lists in the state that they shouldn't be allowed in the building. Premier Edge is what handles our nutrition or our
Food
free
service.
reduced lunch software that the state utilizes. The iSafe Safety online education program is required. You have to teach kids cyber safety at certain grade levels. So that's the curriculum we use for that. You'll see the EPOC website is what we use, and that's how we update our website. The Barracuda is our email archiver, which is required. School Dude is how we do our maintenance and facility custodian requests. And then Windstream, Verizon, Comcast, those are all part of our connections between buildings in order to get our internet service. Those are numbers, and I don't know, Jim, if they're E-rate discounted on here or if that comes later.
The E-rate discount for those types of connections with Windstream and Verizon, Comcast were all eliminated by the federal government, I think last year, the year before. But you'll see down a little bit further, you can see the discounts we do get for the fiber optic wiring we have. And that's Crown Castle at each of the buildings.
So this other software here, Blackboard is the all-call system we use to make calls home. Microsoft is our general renewal fees in order to be able to use the Microsoft Outlook programs within the district. iBoss is what helps monitor our child internet security, which is required by law. Destiny is our library software. VMware is what allows our virtual servers to run. The MERP is our mobile emergency response plan. That is an app that is used if we would ever have an emergency within the district. It houses all of our maps. The state police and the local police are able to access those. The Adobe Creative Cloud is another program that's used across the board in some of our higher end graphic design, those types of classes. Meraki allows us to manage our iPads. So instead of
The Creative Cloud, like, give me some examples of what they're utilizing that for.
that is what allows us to do upload and storage of different programs. For example, if you would do graphic design, maybe in some of our advanced high school classes, that cloud allows you to upload and store there. Adobe really has Adobe is something that has quite the market in monopolizing. I don't know how else other to say it like that. There's not a lot of other programs that allow you to do the same thing as that. And I could get you more detail from that from Andrew if you want me to.
No, it's okay.
The Meraki iPad management, that is one that allows better efficiency within our technology department, because if you don't have some way to manage your iPads, you would have to touch every iPad to put out different apps and those types of things. So this allows us to monitor them, track where those iPads are, and then download software to them.
So every single thing that you've went through on technology is needed to make sure that everything runs smoothly. There's nothing that's extra in any of those service fees, renewals, or types of
Listen, I've stripped this budget. Honest to God, Nancy, I've stripped this budget so much that
Okay,
if
that's
Andrew's
all I'm
able to
asking, so
function
that
next year,
I
I'll
won't
be
spend
shocked.
my time on that. I'll look elsewhere. I don't want to deprive the kids of needed
Well,
technology.
listen,
If
then
that's
what I'm showing you here, the answer to your question is yes, we need that.
okay, that is fine. Then I'm trusting your judgment on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So these elementary Chromebooks, this kind of thing, I think this is the part that Jared, you had asked about the CARES money. That's where that we're going to do some purchases and shuffling of equipment to make sure that all of our kids have what they need if we have to do online learning.
So that 45,000 you said was the CARES Act. Back we had the 133 we were using for.
That's this year, that 133.
But Jim, I thought you said we were using that for the notebooks, right? Wasn't that another line item?
Yeah, you're seeing what we're buying with that one. The page before was just a number. Here's the detail behind the number. You can see
just
the type.
making sure I'm on the right page. Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have carts already for all of the Chromebooks.
We do not. Because you got to remember, we're doing a pretty we have carts for the Chromebooks we have. But when you do it, we're doing a pretty significant purchase with those CARES monies. So you have to have, you have carts to charge them in.
Is that going to be with that money too?
Yeah. This whole amount is with that. Yeah, that money.
Okay.
Yep.
And like I said before, when we started this budget's already been looked at with Andrew, and we did cut $45,000 out of it already. So since Tuesday. So
I have a question. Okay. Once you go and the board passes this budget and you have all of these items that you want to purchase, do you automatically go to the vendor and purchase them say like in June, or can you go and not be committed for some reason that maybe perhaps the monies are not coming in and you're doing this over a course of time?
I think it just depends, Nancy, on the needs. This year it's going to be, I got to tell you, it'll be a little bit different this year based on what Pedro Rivera, if we're coming back to school or not coming back to school. So some of those decisions this year are going to be a little different. On a normal year, if it's anything that the teachers or the kids would need for the start of the school year, we would normally order that stuff in July. Some of the replacement things like the projectors we talked about, we don't order those until we need them. So say we budget for 6 replacement projectors and we maybe only throughout the year, maybe we decide we only need 3 or 4, then we don't purchase all 6. So
okay, so basically the bulk of this is going to be purchased early.
I wouldn't, with the exception of possibly the Chromebook type stuff, I can't tell you that, because if we don't come back to school, what we purchase is going to depend on where we're at.
correct.
And I got to tell you, we won't make those decisions until probably we get closer to that July 1st date. Like once it's approved, we know what we would need to start the school year. But until we get word, with the exception of the Chromebooks, because they may be hard to come by, the stuff that can wait, I can tell you will wait.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions on the technology budget? Okay, if not, we'll move on to athletics. And I will preface the athletic budget that this budget really needs a lot of work. As you can see, there hasn't been a whole lot of changes from last year's budget. Pretty much the same numbers were carried forward. a little bit of that is an issue with timing. We closed school on March 13th. Our meetings with the athletic director and the athletic director's meeting with some of the coaches were scheduled for after that. For example, we have a new football coach. Mr. Evans has yet to be able to meet with him and go up to the equipment closet and go through and determine what's needed, what's not needed. Hopefully today, with some of the restrictions being lifted, we can start doing some of that. I will tell you that this budget and the numbers that you see for the 2021 will be reduced. I don't want to use the word significantly, but there's going to be some line items.
A good example for Nancy would be like that stuff we purchased the other day for spring sports. There's still spring sports money in here. That all needs to be taken out.
Right. Correct.
So.
Yeah. When we get a little bit further on in this presentation, I want to show to this committee what my intentions with athletics and athletic supplies are here in a few slides here.
So what I want to just point out, so based on the equitability between male and female, you'll see on here that general consumer supplies are always divided up male and female. That's because we have to stay within Title IX and make sure that we're spending the same amount across sports, across programs, both male and female programs across the board. So that's why you'll see a lot of stuff divided up male and female, because every year we have reporting requirements and we have to report according to that. So whenever you see that, just know that's the reason behind what's here. Jim, do you want me to scroll down just to tell this?
Yeah,
Or do you want me to do it?
You can scroll down. And here I did show you, you'll see where I blacked out a couple pages with some names. But this particular budget doesn't use specific names, it uses positions. So I included the full budget for athletics on here. And just for the committee to know, we spend about $650,000 a year on athletics. And you'll see that number on the bottom here. But I just wanted to, right now, this is what's in the contract for each specific coaching position. And you can see the numbers as you go down through this. And then if you keep going down, again, the 100 sections here, you see 151, 153. You can see the numbers here that is being charged to the athletic program. Event helpers, those are your ticket takers, your gatekeepers, at the various events throughout the year, throughout the seasons. So you can keep going down here.
Back up through there though, for the, I'm assuming BB is baseball. What's the coordinator do?
Where are you at, Nancy?
I'm at line 9, BB.
I think that's basketball.
That's basketball, yes.
Okay, so what's the basketball coordinator?
That's an elementary, I believe that's an elementary program that's run in the district.
Now, Jim, you said there was a position for an assistant athletic director in this budget. Can
Yeah.
you
Right
can you
here.
tell me? Okay.
9,451.
And that has always been in every budget and never spent.
Okay.
So then, okay, and apparently the athletic director, that fee there is going to be different.
Yeah, that is to be determined by the school board, but I'm going off the best available information I have.
And the reason it's in there is,
Contract.
the reason it's in there is because these are all positions that are kind of listed in the supplemental contract. And there are occasions where some of these positions do not get filled.
Yes, okay. And is that something we'll talk about, not with the personnel one?
Correct.
I mean, we had talked, I mean, even Linda had said before in the past, just because it's a position doesn't need, it needs to be filled, correct?
Correct. You don't, right. If you would choose not to fill it, then you don't fill it. Correct.
Now I have a question. Now, if for some reason the students are not able to play sports in the next school year, all these positions here will all of these people receive their salary even though they will not be working at those particular positions?
I think it depends, Nancy, because right now some of these positions are covered by Act 13 that the state passed, which is through June. I think it's through June 30th. So the state would have to come back and pass another act similar to that in order to say you have to put people within your district. Whether they would do that or not, I don't know. But for the fall sports, unless they pass another act, Act 13 would not cover these people.
We have had to pay the coaches for the spring sports pay in full, so you're aware of that.
Right. Because of Act 13.
Because
right.
of Act 13.
But that expires, so it's just a matter whether the state passes another act or how they handle it going forward.
Now, has the administration at all discussed, for example, even if you would like have football, whether or not, how you would handle this as far as large crowds?
If we would still be in, the only way you're allowed to have large crowd gatherings is if you would be in the green phase. So unless we're in the green phase, we would not have any large crowd gatherings.
So then you wouldn't even have football because you
No,
wouldn't let
we might
I
not
mean,
have
you may
fans.
still have it without spectators if the
Yeah.
whip bill holds
Yeah.
it. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's all to be determined here.
Yeah.
Okay.
But as you can see, I just list the positions, and then if you just keep going down, your Social Security, pension fees that go with it. And then beyond that, there isn't a whole lot listed here as far as specific items for each sport. Just so you know, the technical services, female and male, those are your officials that you have to pay for and some support. We did add a line on here for security of
What do you mean, and some
$5,000.
support? What is and some support?
Those are your, again,
That would be for like your officials, and then we have certain schedulers. Is that right, Jim?
right,
That
correct.
schedule certain sports that all schools have to do. That would fall under here.
Yeah, anything like that.
Okay, and getting back, if you would not have spectators at the sporting events, how much money would you lose in revenue, like for the football program?
I can tell you the overall revenue for all athletic events, basketball and football that we charge for, the revenue in the budget, I think, is around $30,000.
Okay.
Could those coaches be furloughed if we don't have sports in the fall? Is that a possibility?
That would be something the solicitor would have to make a determination on because it's part of the teacher's contract. Teachers' contracts have certain protections under a pandemic situation under Public School Code of 1949. So, I mean, if you were able to, yeah. But here's the thing, like, I can't answer that. The solicitor would have to do that determination if the supplementals would fall still under the teacher's contract and if they would be protected.
Yeah.
But we could have, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, but the teachers could have actually been furloughed during this pandemic, correct?
No, they could not be.
They could not have? Okay,
No.
thank you.
They were protected by Act 13.
Correct.
That's what I'm
As
saying.
well as teachers are protected not only by Act 13, but there is specific language in the Public School Code in 1949 that protects them in their entirety.
Right, but we were talking about Act 13 might not come back in the fall.
But teachers are still protected regardless.
Teachers, I'm talking about the athletics though.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm not sure because it's part of that teacher contract, so that's a gray area.
Okay, thank you.
The athletic transportation usually comes in about $60,000, give or take, depending on how many away games you get, but that's a fair number. And then our student accident insurance that you're required to have is $11,150. Still waiting for a new quote for all our insurances across the board. I should have that by the June meeting. And again, now where you're approaching is the 610 categories, and it's all the supplies for each one. And again, this is the part of the budget that we're going to have to get together with Mr. Evans and really work on. I want to focus basically on the next section of the agenda and what my plan or intentions are for the athletics. So one of the things I think is fair for the district to do is not to just buy all our goods and supplies from one supplier. Technically, we should be bidding that out every year. And this is the cover letter I would send out to all the potential bidders. I would send this out to a lot of various vendors, A&E Sports, East Bay, Long Strength, Natelli, Sportsman, a lot of people I'm used to getting bids from to bid on it.
Is there a reason why we weren't already doing this?
I can't answer that. All I know is I'm moving forward, so.
Yeah,
Hey, Jim, if we could also include local people that, you know,
Yeah.
that are in the district too, I would like to make sure that is added.
Yeah, and if you have those vendors' names, just shoot me an email with them on, and I will put those.
I got to say, I agree with Jared on that 100%. Anytime we could use local people and use them, that would be the best option for me.
Yeah,
I'll email you that, Jim.
that's perfect. And one of the things I put in the very first paragraph up is that the school district has the right to reject any and all bids. So if we bid a particular item or uniforms and we don't like the price, we have the right to reject them all. So that is a clause I do put in all the bids. So,
thank you. I'm just baffled that we haven't been doing this all along, but this is going to be a new process for us.
Yeah, so if you go down a little bit further, Dr. Sardin, this is kind of an example and that I'll go out. So this is volleyball. This is what the volleyball coach requested for next year. And in the description, you get very specific about what you want and whether or not you'll take a substitute. So for example, line item number 2 is they want the Tachikara SV5 volleyballs, which are probably the required ones for actual games. So you don't want substitutes for that. This is the sheets that would go out to the vendors. And then what I usually do is, depending on the number of responses, I put together a spreadsheet that I share with the school board of what bids came from each one. And then the members of the school board would determine who we go with. I do need to finalize this list with Mr. Evans to make sure that that's all we need. Again, you'll see different kind of numbers of shoulder pads and helmets on here because we do send our helmets and shoulder pads out at the end of each year to get recertified. And if any helmet or shoulder pad does not get recertified for use, then we have to replace it. So, but this is just giving you guys a general idea of what I want to send out to potential bidders. And then again, we have a right to reject any and all of them.
So our plan, Jim, would be to send this out here sometime later on in May,
Right.
or June, with the intent of, if we don't have fall sports, it wouldn't be something we would award. Is that correct?
Right, that is correct. And it goes back to what both Nancy and Nancy were saying earlier. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like in September at the start of school again. I've been kind of a little bit dragging my feet on this because do we really want to send this out if something's going to go on with these?
Right. And
But we also can reject them all too.
Well, the question I have, Jim, is if and when we do send this out, normally there's a time stipulation on those bids, like how long they're good for.
Yeah.
So if they give us a price
Yeah.
on June 10th, is it good for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Like what normally is the stipulation on that? Because if we send it too early, it would run out and we would have to redo it. And there's
Right.
no sense in
So
doing that.
what was in the page 1 of this bid document is that's actually specified in it. And I actually specified that the bids are good for 60 days. I believe it's in bid conditions, paragraph 2. Bids are to remain in effect for 60 days. Yeah. So just keep in mind with bidding requirements in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to advertise for 3 consecutive weeks. And then you have a formal official bid opening. You just open the bids, and then we'll modify the bids to fit on a spreadsheet so board members will see the high bid and the low bid for each of them. So,
Jim, one question on that. Typically, were we going to one vendor in the past for most of this stuff?
yeah, I would say this, Mr. Philippos, that I would say, and this is my guess, probably 75% of our items have been bought by Natelli. Specific sports items for like helmets, shoulder pads have gone through Century Sports. but those seem, in my study of the athletic spending, seem to be the biggest two vendors that we have.
Okay, so then.
And those are probably your biggest two vendors that most of the districts do use.
Yeah, I can tell you with my history going past, Natelli's is usually very competitive, but this is a surefire way of making sure they stay competitive.
Yeah,
Okay, it works with me.
Were.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, the board would ultimately have the decision. If a local vendor was slightly higher, we could choose the local vendors.
Provided you can justify it under
You
state.
can't just choose because they're local. I mean, you have to have a reason to
Yeah.
disqualify the
Correct.
lowest vendor. Like you
Yeah.
have to have a good sound reason or you can get sued.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You basically have to accept a low bid unless they don't meet the exact specifications you put in the bids, or you can document the reason why you don't want to go with them. If you've had some past dealings with them that they didn't meet your expectations, but you just cannot accept a low bid.
Okay.
Okay?
Not accept the low bid for no good reason.
Correct. But this is my so my plan over the next 2 weeks is to meet with Mr. Evans, finalize the documents that you see for the bid and that you saw in front of you, and then get these out. So again, if there's a member of this committee that has a specific vendor they want this to be mailed to, I will mail them out specific to them. Okay?
What percentage of this athletic equipment would you say is totally not usable for another year?
Got you.
I can't answer that off the top of my head. I will say when you get into specific sports, you have to look at the safety equipment. Football, you definitely need to be buying mouthpieces every year. You get into soccer, you need the shin guards.
Volleyball, you need the under spandex shorts.
That's a required piece of uniform. You get into lacrosse, you need the face mask and the mouth guard and the stick. So,
But some of this, I mean, I know that they're on a replacement regime for uniforms and they try to rotate and order new uniforms. So I'd like to know like how old these uniforms are. Mr. Evans should have all that logged on what was the schedule of who was supposed to get new uniforms.
Right.
Had them,
Yeah.
and,
Nancy, I will say that's one of the items that I really want to look at. I know football, one of the sets for football is up for replacement. Football uniforms, one set is up for replacement this year. And again, given with everything going on, that might be something that we take off the bid list and we just don't buy uniforms this year and use what we have. So, but that's a discussion I need to have with Mr. Evans. But I'll get to cycle what uniforms are to be replaced and what.
And he does have that. He has a list here, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. I believe Hempfield has a pay for play for athletics. Is that correct?
Some districts do have a pay for play. It ranges anywhere to $50 to $100 per player. And then for families, if they have more than one kid, they balance it out. I can tell you that that's a tough thing to implement when you have and you expect people to pay taxes, quite honestly. It's not something that here in this district, when calculated, it would bring in some money, but the amount of money it brings in versus, taxing families more is a philosophy over anything else. It's not a huge amount, though. I don't know about Hempfield, but for us, it's not a huge amount.
I will say this, because again, I was involved with some discussions with that. And I will say this, and I apologize.
Not in York, though.
I apologize because I'm new to York, but at the end of the day, most athletes across Pennsylvania, their family belongs to a booster club or a parent club, and they're usually paying a fee into that club. So they're essentially paying to play right now. And you really look at the benefit of some of those clubs and what they're giving back into the program. And you're just thankful for getting the support from those booster clubs and whatnot. So to say that we don't have a pay to play, isn't actually correct, because a lot of these boosters are getting support directly from the parents, and they're putting money back into the program for the district. So
But do you
I
find
would just caution you on that. That's all.
okay, but I mean, do you find that probably the more wealthier school districts have the pay for play, and when you get into the school districts that don't have the incomes, then you don't see that as much?
That's probably a correct statement.
Okay.
There is a good benefit to having boosters, and they do put a lot back into the program. So. Does anybody have any other questions with these bid documents? Again, this is something I'd like to implement right away here and get them out here within the next week or two. And then when I got a summary of what bids were received, I do put a summary sheet in front of the board for their approval.
I think that's a good idea.
Any other questions? And then any other items that this committee would like to see, and then we can schedule another meeting.
I think athletics are basically going to still be up in the air. Then a lot of the questions can't really be answered until we get more information from the governor and the governor's office then.
Same with the budget.
And honestly, that probably, Jared, won't be prior to a final budget approval.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
June.
it's,
So, I mean, I would imagine there's not going to be a lot of decisions made with regard to athletics, probably into July or August, quite honestly.
I would agree with you.
I agree with that also. We have no idea what's going to happen.
Any other questions with regard to this public budget meeting specifically?
Yeah. And if you think of questions beyond the meeting, just send me an email. I'll respond to the full committee with the answers.
Well, I think my only comment is I think that I'm really, really concerned. I just don't see, from listening to the news and what's going on, that the revenues are going to come in like you hope they are. I guess I'm a little bit more cautious.
I look at them every day. I can't disagree with you. So I'm just hoping with some of these restrictions being lifted, that some people get called back to work, and the impact on our budget isn't as big as it is. I think Alan just alluded to it. The state budget, we need some direction from the state and what they're really going to support school districts with this year. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Dr.
Yep.
Sargent.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your guys' time and attention. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to hang on one second. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm not sure how to do this.